We're going to get started. Welcome everybody. My name is Juan Morales. I'm the Director of the School Facilities and Transportation Services Division here at the Department of Ed. We here today have on my team. We have Fred Yeager, the Assistant Director, Michael, Consultant, Corinne, our Executive Secretary, Leslie Taylor, a Consultant. We have Ariano, she's a student with us right now. Molly Stitch, one of our consultants. Missing. That's it.
I think that leaves a spot.
Okay.
Diane's down in the overflow room.
Well, again, excited to have you here today. Before we started, I wanted to start off with a couple of housekeeping items. First, I'll let everybody know that this is being recorded. We are in a webinar, which we have folks online listen to the conversation, watch PowerPoint, but they will to provide us verbal comments. They can, however, submit written comments via our website, email address, which is Title 5, the number 5, at cde.ca.gov. So, learning online, welcome. If you have any questions, this is folks online, folks here in the room. I'm going to say we hold off until the end, so you get the opportunity to go through our presentation, and I have plenty of time at the end to answer questions and make sure that comments. For you online, if you do submit questions, please know that we are going to read them out loud here in the room. So please make sure that you state your name and the organization that you're from. And for those of you here, restrooms. If you go to the store, make a left. You go down, past the elevators. The restrooms will be on your left-hand side. You don't need a key or a pin to get in. Nope, no badge. So, the objective of the meeting today is really to give you some background on Title V, history, to provide a summary on some of the comments that we've heard in the last couple of years on what we should do regarding Title V. What kinds we should consider and changing. It's going to be a high-level concept that we've heard, so we're going to share with you. But really importantly is to give you an opportunity to provide us input. For you to ask, well, what is it? What do you consider changing? What California standards? I'll repeat it. Basically, what should California standards look like? And that's the main objective for the meeting today. This is the first meeting that we have. We do are having several other input sessions, if you will, throughout the state. Mayors of the state to provide different people an opportunity to provide comments. So we're going to make that opportunity, and we're going to have an opportunity to have providers written comments as well. Even if we may not have any kind of comments today, we will be accepting input throughout the next couple months. So we close the input session. So a question that's been asked me is why? Why do Title V? Why is CDE reviewing now? Why engage in this effort? I'm going to start off by saying that they have not been updated since 2000. So yes, over 6 years ago. All has happened here in California in the academic world in 16 years, right? We have the low control funding formula and accountability plan. We have transitional kindergarten. We have Common Core standards. We have generation science standards. We have electronic testing online. There's a lot of things that have happened in the education world. We also have a growing body of research that tells us that the school facilities do affect learning. There's other changes in terms of the educational planning practices to consider, like sustainability. So there are things that have changed, and our regulations have not. There's other things that have to review in terms of just make sure that the regs are clear. We have the appropriate references and code, citations. think that it's not just proven, it's necessary. It's the first step. Take the regulations, update, should they be updated, make sure that we do have regulations that reflect the current educational environment. Like I mentioned earlier, this is just the first meeting. To provide you some background. We are going to continue to we're at the regional meetings probably May 1 by the end of the year, but probably starting at the beginning of next year. And it'll be a similar format. That'll be an opportunity for folks to provide us input. So one of the things that I also want to point out is that we don't have proposed regulations for you to review. We are in this review process. We want to hear from you. We want to hear from you to tell us things that we need to consider in order to develop potential proposed regulations. So what are we going through today? We're going to do a couple of things. If you go to the slide, basically, we'll give you the background. Again, like I said, we're going to summarize some analysis that we heard in the past. We're going to talk next steps, what happens after this. And then we're going to open up first for questions that you have, and we'll open it up for comments for us to consider. So with that, I'll hand it over to our experts. So Mr. Yeager, please, take it away.
Everybody sign in because we are having a lottery for Michael's McCartney ticket. No. Sign in anyway then. Yeah, I'll leave it up here. I'll put the time at 8 o'clock. Here you go. So all regulations need some statutory authority upon which the administering body, in this case, the Board of Education, to adopt. So ours for Title V is in Education Code 17251, which does a number of things. See that we are to advise districts upon their request on the merits of potential school sites, specifically for educational merit, safety, reduction of traffic hazards, and conformity to land use elements of the general plan. And so this is typically, for those that are familiar with our process, our initial site review 4.0, where we look at those items as well as other factors and give you a relative ranking of potential sites. It contains the section that develop standards for use by school districts, election of sites, and standards for use in safe and educationally appropriate school plans. So those are the foundations that allow us to build in the standards through the regulatory process in Title V. Okay. So, as Juan mentioned, Title V was last amended by Joanne in 2000. He had some help from Payne, I think. It was a pain there. And before that, they were initially adopted in 1993, and before that, there were earlier versions of a much scaled-down content. But since 2000, the Title V regulations have been a flexible and adaptable. 15. Okay, I'll wait. A full and adaptable standard that allows communities to design schools based on their own community's unique needs. And in 1998, $35 billion in state funds and about $65 billion in local funds have been using Title V standards. So all district projects must meet Title V. Being as a condition of funding the state allocation board, it's required that you have our review and approval of compliance with those standards. The main difference really between a district review building project to Title V and one asking for our review or participation in the site acquisition is approval of Department of Toxic Substances Control when applicable. Minor addition. But generally, all land acquisitions, if the state is paying the funding, need Department of Toxic Substances Control. Other standards are fairly similar. Charter schools are not subject to Title V. They request funding through the state allocation board because there is specific statute and the school facility program that requires that. So charter schools, as we've seen, are located in any number of storefronts or in other buildings approved by the local building department. So Title V contains a number of standards. I like to describe them as prescriptive standards. Backwards order. Performance standards. Those that are discussed, a space shall be well lighted, or the number of showers in the locker room is sufficient. They are usually interpreted by the district as, what is sufficient for their education program, their history of students using the showers. So there are a number of those performance standards, where CD can count shower heads and says 8 is sufficient, 6 is insufficient. We have prescriptive standards. Those are generally well-defined and something we can look at, yes, that passes or it doesn't. Some examples of those are supervision of the health office, operation of vehicles and pedestrians. Okay. And process. There are many procedural regulations in Title V that district has to conduct studies. They evaluate the safety of a nearby pipeline. They can adopt CEQA. So they're procedural steps. Again, mostly those are things that we can say, yes, you did have a hearing, you did adopt it. But there are occasions where we may question, say, did their health, their quarter-mile findings, no hazardous area meters within a quarter mile. But we happen to also know that there's a plant across the street. So we would ask, did you have that? We don't judge on the validity of their science or the board's determination as long as there's a reasonable background of support for that. And the key pieces of Title V is the exemption process. A may request if there's one So, exemption process allows a district to request from the superintendent an exemption from any of the standards in Title V as long as they document that it does not compromise educational appropriateness or student safety. That is something that allows districts to respond to their own community's unique needs and these schools with flexibility that Title V provides. Last one. So to give a quick overview of the sections within Title V and what's an example of what's in each one. So Section 14001, that's the first one in our section of Title V, and just as Title V is all of education, and it goes from 1 to infinity. Our section is 14001. So when people Title V, it can mean anything from teacher credentialing to maintenance of student records. Our section is 14001. So 001, minimum standards. These are high-level goals such as a school should be developed based on an educational program need, flexible and adaptable. Sort of principles that would guide overall planning process. Section 010 are the standards of school sites, and those are what we use in our evaluation of a district's application for site approval and what the district approves sites for. The things on site, age, surrounding uses. Without border. Next section, 14030 are the standards for plans, classrooms, relationships of buildings on campus. Section on procedures, 1411 and 1412 for site and 1401 and 033 for plans are related to the process if funding is involved or low funding only. And the main difference being the involved Department of Toxic Substances Control is non-compliance with the site collection standards. So one of the standards here is that the district maintains the records for site plans that they evaluated for consistency with Title V, and those need to be maintained in the district's records. That should, go to a Title V as you develop a project and say how it's Title V. And there are just another 1405 that we can request to the State Education Board the replacement of some educationally inadequate facilities, and 14036 regarding special education integrated into the campus, system with least restrictive environment and appropriate public education. So that's the content of Title V. Michael's going to delve into some of the comments we've been receiving, and those mostly deal in the 14010, 14030, and some of the procedural steps.
Thank you, Fred. I'll be taking a few minutes to talk about prior comments received from stakeholders about Title V regulations, but first I must preface that purposes of today's presentation, I'll only be providing a high-level summary of the comments received. I'm not going to go into all the comments received, nor will I get into many of the specifics of each of those comments. And also note that some of the comments and suggestions are probably more appropriately addressed maybe in Title V regulations, but maybe in guidance or in even a code change or a story change. So over several years, CD has received suggested changes, additions, or even just concerns about Title V standards from numerous sources, including a variety of professional associations, advocacy groups, academic researchers, state agencies, local agencies like cities and counties, districts, county offices of ed, architects, consultants, so a wide range of and spectrum of those suggested comments. Some of the global or higher level lenses that can be used to describe or contain these prior contents are: one, that 5 should support or align with state sustainability goals and the state planning priorities. These are essentially to have smart, efficient growth that is aimed at climate change by reducing greenhouse gases, primarily by reducing vehicle miles traveled, increasing active transportation or walking and biking, and transit. And other broader themes of local planning, collaboration, and like that. The state planning priorities, which are in government code, are really aimed at promoting things like equity, efficient use of land and resources, promote infill development, use of existing infrastructure and transit while protecting natural resources and agricultural land, and only developing, say, in areas that are planned for growth. And one of the outcomes of the CE's 2008 roundtable, and I'll mention various other study or efforts, including those from UC Berkeley Center for Cities and Schools, is that CE has developed 12 guiding principles. Now, they're not currently part of Title V, however, suggested as guidance for the siting and design of school facilities. And these principles reflect everything from promoting the use of facility master plans and educational specifications, early local planning, agency collaboration, accommodating community services on school sites, sustainable facilities and practices, and safe and healthy 21st century learning environments. You'll see more about those guiding principles. They're on our webpage if you haven't already looked at them in detail. Next slide. More specifically, with reference to siting standards, we've had input that some say they would prefer to do away with the broad minimum acreage standards and add more flexibility, or rather maybe an individual case-by-case justification of the acreage required each proposed school site. Then requests for greater specificity and clarity in evaluating certain hazards, such as pipelines, power lines, flooding, and how they're documented, exempted, and what the school district governing board reviews and approves. Suggested that there be more emphasis on early and early consistency with long-term district-wide board-adopted facility master plans, and that those facility master plans have more specified minimum content. It also suggested there be a greater emphasis on early and better LE or local educational agency collaboration with local agencies, a way of having transparency and accountability with locally adopted plans and standards, and to document that they're in support of larger sustainable community planning efforts. But with regards to the plan standards, there has been some expressed interest in allowing more flexibility and creativity in the design of learning spaces. Instead of, say, for example, prescribed 960 square foot four-wall classrooms, but rather adjust to the new 21st century learning environments with all of the new programs and academic changes that have occurred in the last 16 years, new technologies. There's also been a tremendous amount of research that's focused on the indoor environmental quality, affects a number of things, as well as testing requirements are now changing, as you're probably well. And the emphasis on individual learning styles or project-based learning, these all have facility impacts. Step back for a second. We have been tracking the research, and a lot of research has shown a good correlation between indoor environmental quality, including things like lighting, air quality, and acoustics, among others, and their effects on health, attendance, and academic performance. I've even suggested that each school district should have their own standards that address these, not just assuming that a minimum energy code somewhere is going to be sufficient. Others suggested the need for Title V to better address the adequacy of food services and kitchens and sufficient areas to eat and time to eat, number of lunch periods, as well as with new things coming out on accessibility to fresh water. They all have a relationship that can affect health, nutrition, and thus student performance. So noted that with increased use of career technical education, STEM or science, technology, engineering, and math, or something that's STEAM to make it arts, raise questions about the need for special standards or design issues for these types of programs to be operated in schools. The changing nature of the library services that are provided in schools, or the use of traditional K, they all suggest they need to be addressed in Title V standards. In addition, some special education needs have been brought to our attention. We ask ourselves, are the current standards adequate? Do they need change to better address things like inclusion or consultations between SELPAs, County Office of Eds, and school districts? On the plan standards, design issues with parking lots and pedestrian access and safety. These have been regularly identified since I'm here as needing further attention and clarity. Next slide. The final major area or global prior comments received is that of the procedures section of Title V. And these can be really described, the first one there, as a desire for more increased accountability and documentation of or acknowledgement by school district governing boards regarding, say, things like CDEs, initial site reviews, preliminary plan comments, determinations for compliance with Title V, origins to Title V, public notifications and hearings, general plan and zoning consistency or override of those, even consideration of regional plans, such as regional transportation plans and sustainability strategies. Also, hazard evaluations and determinations that are cited in Title V need to be updated and consistent with the most current code requirements. A number of those codes that they're based on, government codes, public resource codes, and ed codes, have changed slightly since the last time Title V was. So we need to make those consistent, those Title V standards consistent with the requirements of the codes. And regarding special ed again, desire to somehow encourage early consultation, collaboration between county offices of ed and school districts regarding the special ed facility needs on school district sites. That's a brief summary of prior comments received. As I mentioned, I did not mention all the comments received or get into specifics, but that'd be the general gist. And I'll turn it back over to Juan.
Okay, so next steps. Like I mentioned earlier, this is just the first meeting. We are going to have more through the meeting part of 2017. And again, between now and then, we're going to continuously accept comments. We close the input session. We're going to take a look at all the comments. We're going to what's appropriate for the department, for the state superintendent to move forward. Ultimately, they will be presented to the State Board of Education. These regs have to get approved by the SBE. Once we do, the proposed text will become available publicly. There'll be an opportunity to provide public comment during these board meetings. And should the board approve them, then move over to the regulatory process, which is going through the Office of Administrative Law and Administrative Procedures Act. And that opens up, there'll be another opportunity for public comment on the actual text. It won't be until OAL approves the regs that they will become effective. And again, on the timeline, that could be sometime at the end of next year. So I'm opening it up right now first for questions on the process, on the material that we presented today, and then we'll open it up for comments, for input. So once again, if you have a question, for those of you here and those of you online, if you please state your name and the organization you're with, we'll start off with questions.
Well, because the state board has to approve these regulations, at what point in the process do you plan to involve them?
State board staff is already aware that we're looking at them. We don't have anything ready. They're aware we're engaging in an input process right now that would ultimately to them to an item.
The major, once we went through a lot of the involvement with the stakeholders, John Mockler was the executive director, had a lot of ideas himself as to how the title regulation should be written, and if we were to do it differently back in 2000, we would have involved the state board a little earlier.
Yeah. Like at this point, I know staff is aware, but we don't have a proposal yet. We don't have any idea what we're going to propose, but they're at least aware that we're initiating this process.
I have two questions on the fair comments going back to the year 2000 or thereabouts. One, are they going to be considered of equal value, equal weight in this process? Or, that's the question. The second is, will that input be identified just like today's input is being identified?
First question, yes, they'll have equal weight. They've not exceeded their shelf life. And we're going to look at all of them. We're going to look at the ones from past. We're also in case anyone thinks that maybe some of those comments are no longer relevant.
That's the reason for my question.
Okay, so
you've got to look at them.
yeah, we're going to look at them again. Today, do they still make sense? And like, I'm interested in hearing from you guys, if you guys think that some of those comments are no relevant, or the new ones, that's part of what we're doing. I don't know if we have, I'm assuming we have information from the prior comments as far as who submitted them. We don't have today. I don't know if there's an institute to make them available or not to make them available. I'm not sure you're asking, so they should include them or not.
I guess the reason I asked the question is that, 16 years of questions and comments.
Yeah.
Versus the attempt in 2017 to get new input. The source of that, and the visuals and how you went there.
Yeah. And that's on putting a list on who said what.
Right.
Instead of just looking at what were the comments, are they still relevant today, what do folks think today, and look at all of the comments regardless of who they came from.
Julie Alvis, Natural Resources Agency. Somebody made a comment that some comments that you received might be more suitable for the regulations and others might be suitable for the guidance that comes out of it. What's the relationship between those two things? Are you doing the 5 regulations first and then you would be drafting new guidance? And how would somebody that has comments know when to engage?
That's a question, because some of them do assist the others. I mean, we were going to start off with the regulations, but we understand that some of our guidance documents, as well as our forms, may need to be updated as well. And we do take a look at all of them. It probably depends on the topic and whether it will affect the regulations or guidance documents. Sometimes I think that we've heard from folks that think that they may regularly taking a close look, we think that maybe they're more statutorily. So we're going to take a look at each comment and find out where does it apply? Does it apply to regs or to the guidance documents? But right now we're open to comments on everything. So not just regs, the documents, the forms as well. Provide us input on all of it, because all of it may have to be, or I think it will have to be evaluated. Complete a thorough examination of the current process. Sorry. Go ahead.
A comment, yes, in the 2000 update, the last one, we also had advisory documents that were updated simultaneously. But we also have continued to publish a number of guidance documents, whether it's healthy children to learn or on topics, 1 to 2 pagers of guidance documents. So it's a continual process that new things have to be addressed in guidance.
Do you plan on involving other divisions within the Department of Education? When I mentioned stakeholders, we have external stakeholders. We have internal stakeholders as well. We went through the process, the PE people, the science people, the curriculum people, the performing arts people, all wanted to provide input to how the facility would be designed. So hopefully plug them in somewhere.
Yes. Excellent. You can tell Dwayne speaks from experience. Yes, we do plan on engaging the divisions here with the department, a lot of different divisions, and some of what they do in facilities. So that's part of the plan. That is part of the process of reviewing, again, but not just from external, but also internal stakeholders.
Rebecca with the County School Consortium. Could you please consider providing us a deadline as you get closer to your State Board of Education proposal?
Yes.
It would be helpful. I know right now it sounds like we're a few months out from that deadline, but just a kind of final stakeholder deadline would be very helpful.
Yeah, and we'll know more in the coming weeks in terms of when we schedule the other regional meetings.
Right.
But yeah, at the conclusion of those regional meetings, we'll also have a deadline to submit written comments.
Okay.
Make sure to submit out things. Do you have any questions on it? Okay. If there are no more questions, we get into the comment period, the input period.
The one I make, so I'll speak. comment. But, Michael had mentioned, the 12 guiding points. We tried to, back in 2000, we had one overarching goal, and that was to balance local and state control. And Connie, we had many discussions about how we do that. What we ended up with was saying what we want to do is establish thresholds below which you should not go, okay? And to counteract that, the comment that we were trying to dictate the size of the classrooms and distance from power lines, that's we put that exemption in there, because the response was always anything can be exempted as long as it doesn't impact student safety or educational appropriateness. So we gave a very wide range of application to Title V. Connie would come up with some real creative classroom designs, that we'd say, well, prove to us that doesn't negatively impact student learning, and we'll approve it, and we approve it. The other thing, just kind of a technical thing, since the state board has to adopt the regulations because the Ed Code says that CDE will establish these regulations rather than the superintendent of public instruction. Honig lost the state versus Honig issue. CDE was interpreted to be the state board. But what we put in the regulations was the superintendent has the authority to grant these exceptions. I was convinced John Mockler that the state board didn't want to have this ongoing list of issues coming to them about the sizes of classrooms and that type of thing. So that's a real goal and efficiently working part of Title V regulations. And everybody that Michael and others read, every one of those comments can be addressed on that overarching issue of the exemption. You can exempt anything, as long as it doesn't impact student learning or student safety.
That's one of the things that you think works well that we should consider keeping.
It worked very well. Never had.
One technical thing on that, Dwayne, because there are some things that have a statutory underlying that the regulation exempt the regulation, but you can't exempt the law. Set of pipelines on the site.
Right.
It's not.
But not one issue got to the superintendent. We were able to resolve it all at the division director level.
I think that's very important. Have the flexibility and the ability for staff to work with school districts, and even the charter schools is also something. That's going to be a clear area of question. Because of the scribble, and then I'll back to state funds. No, you have to go vote. I think it's important.
Thank you. Once again, don't feel like this is, I think, I've been trying to say it more than once, this isn't the only opportunity to provide comments, but what hasn't, any kind of input, we're open to receiving it.
Hi. I'm Liz Courier with Riverside County Office of Education, as well as the immediate past chair for County School Facilities Consortium, which is CSFC. And I know we consist of about 20 county offices of education throughout California, so we have a good representation. And excited for this opportunity to provide comment, as we have done in the past with you too. So TIDE currently provide information for optimization of integration with least restricted environment. We find some challenges with that often, and so we have made that one of our goals at Riverside County as well as CSFC to work on changing that. Currently, IDEA requires students educated in a least restricted environment which is an issue that's related to the siting and planning of school facilities. For our students, that environment is in a county office of ed classroom on a district campus. So as you mentioned, I wanted to go through some challenges that we face firsthand in Riverside County as well as other county offices. I'm sure you know that the students with special needs require consistency and means for them to thrive. So for us, it's a challenge because oftentimes we're required to change that classroom on a an annual basis, and sometimes the site as well as the district. So those students have to be transported sometimes over 3 hours because that's a total day, 3-hour trip on the bus for them to be educated in the closest classroom possible. Another challenge that I've faced and I've seen, which is really, it's hard because as a parent myself, it's not only the children but those families. Then they never have that school. They don't know where their child is going to go next year. So they get involved in PTA or they don't get involved with all of the activities at the site because they're not going to be there because they're just used to being changed and switched. So it can be difficult to coordinate the needs because it includes multiple agencies, as the account said, a district, CELBAs. So it is challenging. And also, 40-year ground leases, which we may have talked to you about before, too. So the 40-year ground leases, I think, from the old lease purchase program, when the school district and then the county office of education had a project together, and then we would put in state funding dollars into the district project. And then you have 40-year ground lease. And those, I think, are really good situations. That's where we've owned a lot of classroom space, and it's great for the kids. 40 years is right around the corner. We have ones that are expiring 2021. We have about 45 throughout our county, expiring in 2021, but that's when it's starting. And so these expire. There's no real concrete language on what happens to those facilities after the fact. So, we can negotiate with school districts or revert back to that school district, and which I've already heard of some plans for what's going to happen to that facility. So that is, a new challenge for something that has worked in the past. The modernization, new construction is really one of the best opportunities is when we can work together with districts and offices to integrate these facilities and plan for them. Really is thinking that along with the funding and financial hardship and other processes that we have to go through is really extremely challenging. So Title does provide some during the special ed integration currently. For example, it requires the location of special ed classrooms to encourage interaction with the general student population. It requires the same bus drop-off area for special education and general education, and it prohibits physical separation from special ed classrooms. So it's great, but they also presuppose that you are able to have a facility located on that classroom, located on that site. So, CEQA as well as Riverside County, we do encourage you to examine, adding some language into Title V. And I know we've mentioned before, it can be something requiring districts to have just a conversation with their COE and their CELBA that talks about the need for special education and providing space on that classroom for one or two of those, for campus for one or two of those classrooms. It could be addition of the site and plan approval on the form that you guys potentially will be updating, and it really raise awareness and hopefully get that thought in the forefront of all of the districts that it's going to have to seriously be considered for the students too. So I know you before, and we've provided these comments in the past. I appreciate seeing them on the slide, and so we're here and we're excited to work with you through
Thank you. Appreciate the comments. And again, right now, we're going to weigh in on any comments. We're just, again, acknowledging all of them. So if you don't hear any feedback from us right now, it's fine, because we're going to take them in and then and then review them. Yeah, so thank you. Do you have a question?
I have a question, not a comment.
Okay.
And that was, how does CEQA interface with the site selection requirement?
You want to answer that?
Yeah, part of the Title V regs require the school district in school site to complete CEQA before they see our site approval. And there are certain determinants and findings that are required as of the Public Resources Code regarding certain hazards that are also must be by the governing board. So we request CDE that will be completed before we give final site and final plan approvals, but not the CEQA police. And there's, we rely upon the lead agency, which is almost always the school district or the county office of ed, to comply with the requirements of CEQA.
Questions online still? No? Okay. Any questions, concerns?
Okay, I have a question that is related, and we get a lot of questions with DSA regarding, and that's solar, counties and solar.
For those who know you, Tracy, can you say your name and?
I'm sorry, I'm Teresa Townsend, I'm with the Division of State Architects, and I oversee our green policy section. So anyways, we get a lot of questions on solar installations, and we have policies that work with code. However, there's the community that is not always happy with what the school is doing. So I was going to suggest, I don't know how to, but I think that it's appropriate for Title V to have something in there regarding solar, whether they be ground-mounted, the two things that are the most in terms of comments from the community down to the site. Mounted, not so much.
I know that we've heard concerns from homeowners where a school district adjacent to their home has them in their parking stalls. But do we have anything on Title V regarding?
We don't approve the Prop 39 project. They're included in a regular plan. Sometimes we'll see them in the detail.
Right.
Other questions that may come up related to that as to how do you design the charge stations for electric vehicles or compressed gas vehicles or other types of vehicles. How are those on-site standards where we would be appreciated in those areas too?
Some of that too is that, a lot maybe the city or counties, too. Title V is just one set of rules that districts have to meet. It's not supposed to be every rule you need to meet. So, it's very focused on student safety, educational appropriateness, but that doesn't mean, they still have to meet all that. The same things that may or may not apply. So,
Exactly, and I think that, I don't know that this is the platform for it, but I think too that, because it's under the umbrella of sustainability, I didn't know if you were going to address it. I know that CEQA address it to some degree, but usually a school has a negative declaration that them. So, but how the neighboring properties are concerned about their views, etc.
And that's, Title V is about what is impacting the school, about how the school is impacting the neighborhood.
Oh, that's
So there's a,
yes.
an neighborhood system.
Along the lines of the
we will be looking at next year, you know, because we're having to start a stakeholder, in regards to bring this out, because the first thing in Algorithm Code is to have infrastructure. And infrastructure for an existing school is quite critical. Once you start touching parking lot, then you trigger other, code requirements. So all that needs to be discussed, and I don't know where you're gonna go with that. I think
Funny.
If I can, go back to, back to Dwayne's way of how he was addressing the provision of this, and that is to resolve these issues at all. And here's what I've said, so there's always changes that are going on. And we cannot write them or anticipate every one of the future changes. So we need to have, you folks have the ability to respond to those changes as certain sentences. I mean, 39 was a little not covered by, you know, covered by all LA. And some of the other entities is was not you folks. Whether we need it or not, and that you're looking at those funded by ORA are going to be reviewed by Title V circumstances. Prop 39, not necessarily, and those future what's going to happen. So provide yourself with the flexibility. I would suggest. Allow at the department level to make those terms rather than be too prescriptive.
Yeah, the regulations say the superintendent has the authority to grant exemption. I was lucky enough to work with some superintendents where I was their designated representative, and they delegated that authority to the division director. Like I said, we never had to take it to the superintendent level. We resolved it.
Yeah, that's sort of imperative.
So listen, this is Liz from Strategic Growth Council. Are you able to do like a class of exemption so that if you did it for one school, it automatically would be like if something new like solar comes up, you can then everybody who is doing this type of a project or something?
We would come in with a plan for a series of schools, and certain components in there would get exemptions from Title V, and that would apply to that specification that he would use, building 3, 4, 5 different elementary schools.
So then if Riverside wanted to do the same thing, would they have to do the same process, or would the exemptions be there so they could just?
I have to defer to the current keepers of the keys there. But
I always say that the district would have to document the unique, what's different than Riverside, what's the difference. But it's presidential in some ways.
Yeah. One of the verses that we have, just for you guys to review in terms of the things and the principles and prior reports that we've had. When I'm in this presentation online, so you'll have the webinar, all the information available online as well.
Sure. Derek O'Brien, JK Architecture, also representing formerly STEFI, now known as Association for Learning Environments, our chapter president for Northern California and Nevada. Excited to be here, just coming back from Philadelphia, so pretty inspired about education right now. Kind of reflecting upon the notion that we're all here essentially to help students and teachers get back to learning. And I think one thing that may be helpful in this conversation to really keep our focus moving forward is the notion when comments are shared, let's identify case studies. Because it's one professional to think we know what really needs to be put into the regs. But I think, the politics that get in the way, we identify some of those examples that we're seeing some of these challenges, give others the ability to go and actually talk to those stakeholders, talk to those teachers, talk to those students, and essentially bring validity to some of the regular challenges that we're facing, but really from school site perspective. And I see comments and school site examples being local, national, international, public charter. I think for us to stay in the fortification, which California is, I think we got to continue to kind of look diverse.
Thank you. Comments? Still no questions from my friends online? Okay. All right, well, if there are no more comments or questions, we're done with our part of the presentation. I'm gonna, email address, actually, we're gonna go back to the other items. Sort of comments to the email address, be accepted in for the next couple of months, and we will provide a deadline in the future. I thank you all for being here. Thank you all for being online who participated. We'll be having more of these. I look forward to working with you and improving Title V.
Remember to sign up for Michael's tickets?
Oh, yeah. Thank you.